We've just heard how the world is changing. Now it's time to look at how markets are interpreting that change. What does this moment look like from a global investment perspective? What are the real risks? And let's stay on a hopeful note and also look at what are the opportunities. I'm very pleased to welcome our next speaker, Roloef Salomons, who is a former professor in investment theory and asset management at the University of Groningen and now chief strategist at the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock. Please give Roloef a big hand. I'll just take all my papers, Roloef.
And I do think I have a clicker here, so that should work. And my mic also works, so that's a good start. Thanks for that. Thanks for the kind introduction. When we were discussing, I asked Vibeke, can you please say that I'm partly academic as well as somebody who's in practice, because that allows me to kind of say everything I want. Because when I say something which you find offensive or untrue or whatever, then it's academic freedom. If I say something that you think, okay, this makes a lot of sense, that's a smart comment, that's business. Okay, with that out of the way, then I think I've just learned. One thing I have to say. My father used to be a pilot, and before he became a pilot, he used to work for Maersk. I'm the only one in the family who is not in the shipping industry because I can't read colors. I can't see colors, so that's the one reason. And I couldn't learn Danish. But I learned Google Translate can improve. Because I was checking with Google Translate for some of the things that were being said, and I could follow some of it, but not everything. I do have one comment that I want to follow up on, because I think there was a speech from Carney being mentioned, and that's about middle powers, and I think that's something that we want to talk about in this presentation as well. I'll go and stand in the middle. So what I've done here today is a short presentation. When we were discussing this, I said, okay, how shall we do this? Do you want me to do a presentation with a lot of slides, with a lot of text on there? We can do that. No problem. No, don't do that. Shall I use visuals? Okay, that's great. So what I have for you today are 3 pictures, and these pictures tell a story. And I'll start with the Artemis trip around the moon. So that's my first picture, if it works. The second picture is of an alarm clock, and the third one is of a crocodile. Yeah? And by telling that story, I will take you through what's going on in the global economy, what's going on in global markets, what's going on in geopolitics. I can't get off my academic pedestal, so I'll throw in a bit of high school economics as well. Simple, it's all about supply and demand, nothing too fancy. And with that, then that builds a story, and I'll be complete. It's going to be a positive story. Yeah? So I'll start on a positive note, and I'll also end on a positive note. So with that out of the way, let's start. My first picture. This is the Artemis. And this is what technology can do for us. This is the furthest that mankind has ever traveled. So that's technology. But there are 3 other reasons why I wanted to show this picture. First, this is the dark side of the moon, the other side of the moon, which is mankind has never been there. Sunlight can't come there, and trust me, this is a mental leap, but sunlight travels even further than mankind to land on Earth, and this is my link to supply side. Sun doesn't care about what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. There's always sun. There's always wind. There's always these sources of energy. So I think that's one of the things that we can take away from this. We are going to spend more, and we're going to invest more in renewables. The other thing I wanted to say here, the moon is high on helium-3, which is a peculiar form of helium, which is hardly ever found on Earth. But I think what we've learned over the last couple of weeks is that helium is also traveling to the Strait of Hormuz. So it is not just a supply shock in terms of oil, natural gas, liquid natural gas, but also in terms of helium, fertilizers, etc. So that's the second reason I want to show you. This is a massive supply shock globally, man-made. And I think the final reason, but that's a funny one, how can you ever show a slide on the dark side of the moon and make a quote on Pink Floyd? You have to take that, you have to do that. So, but I think the main point is this is the fourth supply shock which is hitting the global economy in the last 5 years. And that is completely different from the world that we all grew up in, or at least I grew up in. I started in this business in '97, and up until that time we did have supply shocks, but most of the supply shocks we've had were positive supply shocks. Fall of the Berlin Wall, internet revolution, more supply, and now all of a sudden we have, well, COVID, Russian invasion in Ukraine, tariffs, and now the war in the Middle East. Negative supply shocks. And negative supply shocks, they hurt growth and they raise inflation. While positive supply shocks, this is the high school economics, positive supply shocks lift growth and lower inflation. So this is a completely different world than the world we grew up in, and that has implications for how the economy works, how financial markets work. It has implications for the cost of capital, it has implications for returns on capital, and it has implications for how you run businesses. So I think that being said, that's the first thing. And the second point is, then I have to talk about Europe, because Europe is in the midst of some of these supply shocks. And this is an alarm clock. And I think it was William Hague, the UK politician, who said that the alarm went off quite a few times in Europe, but we hit the snooze button. I don't think we're doing that anymore. I think Europe has now figured out, or knows, the leaders in Europe, the corporate leaders, the academic leaders, the politicians, we all know that this is again a supply shock. We cannot rely for safety on a safety umbrella anymore. We cannot rely on cheap energy coming out of Russia, or from Germany closed their nuclear plants. And I grew up on top of a large gas field in the Netherlands, which is also completely closed down because there are cracks in my father's and mother's house. So supply shock is happening, and Europe knows that we need to deal with all these issues. And that I think these three areas where I think there's massive opportunities going forward. It's on the intersection of defense, where Europe is now spending. And if I would have gone back 25 years and be standing in a room and saying that Germany would issue debt and borrow money to finance stuff, people would have laughed me out of the room, but that is happening now. So Europe is becoming one. My joke has always been, if Germany and if Germany becomes a bit more French and the French become a bit more German, then Europe is one. Well, Germany is spending. Now France needs to reform. Might take a bit longer. But I think that's the positive side is people are seeing those, the leaders in Europe are seeing the developments. We're taking economic leadership. We're spending, the governments are spending where they need to spend on defense, on energy transition, and I think also on technology. And at that intersection between those three areas, that's where I think, where we think are the biggest opportunities going forward. But there's one other thing, and that's my last slide. It's a crocodile, but I made sure to keep it a friendly crocodile. So the jaws are closed. But when I think the analogy of a crocodile is pretty helpful. When I was teaching my students, I always said, well, the economic cycle is not too difficult. On the one hand, you have the upper jaw of a crocodile. On the other hand, you have the lower jaw of a crocodile. One of them is returns on capital. The other is cost of capital. And if the two meet, you have a recession. And if the two are really far apart, that's a great environment to be investing. And if there's one thing that Europe has plenty of, it's capital. We have no shortage of capital. We have no shortage of ideas. And we do have sound institutions, which is also really helpful. Some of people say, well, regulation is bothersome. Yeah, but it can also be pretty helpful, because you can have reliable and stable regulation that helps attract capital. The only thing which would be really helpful, if those returns on capital would be a bit higher, so the gap between returns on capital and cost of capital is even wider than it is now. But even there, I think we're seeing incremental changes. All our clients are asking us for the same question: where are the biggest opportunities? Governments are trying to make sure that capital flows from A to B, making sure that the cost of capital gets lower, making sure that returns on capital are being increased. And I think that's where the biggest opportunities are. So with an eye on the clock, 3 pictures to make the story. Picture of the Artemis, which is the wonders of technology, which we need to do a lot of investing in. Second, the picture of an alarm clock. We're wide awake. We're wide awake. And the third one is the picture of a crocodile. We have plenty of capital, and the returns on capital are clearly there, and that creates a massive investment opportunity, but it's going to be volatile. And that's something we have to learn and live with. Thank you.